land of the Wurundjeri and the Boon Bunurong people, and they have been essentially stewards and custodians of this land for nigh over 60,000 years. I'd like to acknowledge their elders past and present, and we have still so much to learn from them. Tara, I don't know if you'd like to do Tara, an acknowledgement for Canada as well.
Yeah, when we get, we have one in our slides, so we can.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm going to start the share, and let's just make sure we get that. Can you guys see the screen? Enabling change, is that clear to everybody?
Yep. Clear. I'll just ask everyone to make sure their microphones are muted. Tara and Dion and Zara are from the University of British Columbia Botanical Gardens in Vancouver in Canada. They have been working on this for, I think, nigh on a year now, and did a quick preview at the Botanic Gardens Congress in Singapore, which was quite exciting. So I'll pass it over to you now, Tara.
Thank you, Tessa, and thank you everyone for coming today. We're excited to share this tool that we have definitely been co-creating with many of your input and contributions. So what I wanted to do is we're going to be sharing this menu of adaptation action that hopefully can provide some inspiration and guidance for other botanic gardens and other people stewarding landscapes and plants to think about taking action for climate adaptation. Bear with me. Here we go. So we're at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. Our botanic garden grows on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Hunkaminam speaking people. This is an incredibly important part of the work that we're doing to advance truth and reconciliation with Indigenous people and understanding our history on these lands and how we can conserve plants in a changing climate while also advancing the rights of Indigenous people. What we wanted to do today in our 45 minutes together was to share a bit of this is our roadmap for our time together, share a little bit of context on our approach to climate adaptation, why a menu, what inspired us in this menu, how we've been developing this menu and co-creating it with many from the Botanic Garden community, and to share our draft framework of where we and how we've organized the strategies, approaches, and tactics that Botanic Gardens and other landscape stewards might be able to draw from. And then we're really also hoping to do some interactive participation with you all and learn more about where you're coming from and the opportunities and the challenges that you may face in your institution. So our goals are hopefully at the end of this, you can learn a bit about what Botanic Gardens are doing worldwide in the area of climate adaptation, share and learn about the menu that we've been developing, and really much of this work really led by Melbourne and the Climate Change Alliance of Botanic Gardens is really how do we all work collectively together across our networks to share resources, actions, and ideas and next steps. So this is a bit of the team that we've been working together with over many years, working with the BGCI at the global level, also with the American Public Garden Association at the North America level, and of course with the Climate Change Alliance of Botanic Gardens. So just really wanting to highlight how many minds have contributed to this work and how truly collaborative this work is. And in this work in particular, Peter has been helping and guiding us from afar, which is amazing to have all the technologies that can help us really tap into the experience and knowledge that has been gained by other gardens, and in particular by Melbourne, who's been leading much of this work. So just as a bit of grounding, I think one of the things that we realized in sharing this presentation with Botanic Gardens and public gardens in the United States was there's different understandings of what we mean by mitigation and adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So we just wanted to lay out here what we've been approaching and how we've been thinking about this work. Mitigation is, in my view, really about reducing and removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Disaster risk reduction is preparing for extreme events. And when we're talking here today, and a lot of our focus has been on climate adaptation, is how do we reduce the vulnerability and enhance the resilience of our collections, of our institutions, our communities, and our landscapes. So we're going to try a little Zoom activity. No, sorry, Teams activity. And I'm hoping that we can use the chat. So people hopefully are comfortable with chat. And we're going to sort of put in the chat. The first question is, what would you like to learn about climate adaptation today? And if you could take a moment in the chat to just sort of put your burning questions. And coming to the session today, it's helpful for us to know if there was particular things you're hoping to learn about, whether it be networks or tools or resources. So, for example, and my goal is that we put it in the chat, and then when I say go, we all press enter at the same time, and you get this sort of waterfall of information. So we're going to try that, okay? So take a moment. I'll be quiet, but I want to see, hopefully people are typing and putting in what they might want to learn. What do we want to learn? We want to learn what others are doing and the barriers you may face. So I haven't pressed enter yet. We give everyone a little bit of an opportunity to just think about it. Okay, and on 3, we're all going to press enter, and then we're going to see all of this flow of information. So 1, 2, and 3. Does it work? Do we get a waterfall? Oh, yes, look at that. Water is such a critical piece that we're facing, right? So what I like about this activity is that we sort of just see everyone's collective thoughts. People are looking for more tools and available resources, understanding who our allies are. And that is definitely one of the things I've learned about this work and have so benefited from the Climate Change Alliance, is finding the allies and the people who help. I too would like to see the future. And dealing with uncertainty is such a big part of what we're doing and trying to manage. And seeing a range of adaptations used in other gardens. I think we have so much to learn.
This is a good one.
And Jill, thank you for sharing. You're a new garden, planning your native garden and thinking sort of long-term about what and how you make decisions today for long-term. So thank you. And please feel free to keep adding in if there's other things that other people have said that have inspired you. Please, please continue to add those in. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing from Lebanon. That's fantastic. So that's our first little waterfall activity. We're going to come back and do a few more of these throughout. So just don't put your chat away just yet. I wanted to just highlight some of the work that we've been doing and thinking about adaptation and really trying to make sure that we're aligning to the global policies that are emerging. This was a slide that what we did was we took the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and said, where does adaptation come into this framework? So these red boxes are sort of where we were thinking there was very strong overlap between climate adaptation and the global biodiversity framework. And then for those of you that don't know, what was really exciting, BGCI has been leading this, but at the recent COP16 in Cali, Colombia, the global strategy for plant conservation was adopted. And this is a really important policy for Botanic Gardens because the global strategy for plant conservation directly aligns to this Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And so I'm really personally excited because it means that we now have at a local level a global strategy that can unify us all for plant conservation. Also, just wanting to highlight that when Botanic Gardens at a local level are thinking about their work, it has such global implications. And so what we wanted to do, building off of the last slide, is just pull out the global biodiversity framework targets and say this is where, by advancing climate adaptation, we're definitely advancing these global policies. And there's a real significant alignment between adaptation planning and long-term thinking and global policies. And of course, there's also alignment with other policies like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so these are things of our sort of ideas have been thinking globally and acting locally. And the work that we and the decisions that we make at a very local level for Botanic Gardens have, I think, such global alignment, and there's so much we can share across our networks. And there's so much I've learned from other Botanic Gardens. And there's learning from other Botanic Gardens, and then there's learning from other people who are doing landscape level planning. And much of our work here has really been inspired by work done by the United States Department of Agriculture. They have done some really fantastic work with landscape adaptation planning. And this was an image that we borrowed from their report that's talking about adaptive management journeys. And this is something that we talk a lot about in thinking about climate adaptation, is being on a journey of, when we're planning, we want to be thinking and strategizing, and definitely monitoring and evaluation and reflection is critical to shifting and pivoting in this very uncertain, highly changing environment. So now what I wanted to do is we're going to go back to our chat and we're going to explore what is your organization doing for climate adaptation. If you've been a long-standing leader like the Melbourne Botanic Garden, you can say you're trying to implement. If you're just getting started, you can also just share some of the things that you're thinking about. What we're wanting to do is just get a bit of a sneak peek about what people who are showing up here today, what's on their minds about what you've been doing this past year in regards of climate adaptation. So again, we're going to take a moment and you can put your answer in the chat. We're not going to press enter, and we're going to try to do this waterfall thing again. So I'm just going to give you a minute. I'll be quiet, and while you can kind of just do a bit of a brainstorm about what your garden or your institution has been doing. Okay, so is that enough time for people to be able to write it in, and we can maybe on 3 press enter and see our waterfall of information. Hold on, I'll just press there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, let's see what everybody is working on. So we have analyzing extreme climate indices from the IPCC. So there's so much technical information that gardens have to look at and think about how we plan for these future climates, and some really interesting work around phenology. And you've added 2 meteorological stations to our facilities. That's fantastic. That's something that I would definitely love to learn more about, how gardens are managing their microclimates. I think that's a really neat way for us to share knowledge across there. And there's great work happening to look at transitioning landscapes and living collections, designing landscapes and buildings to be sustainable, teaching tools, really neat. I like that. At Longwood, they're in the initial stage of understanding the impacts and how we can respond to these. constantly working on adaptation of the garden, and nudging and socializing climate adaptation. There's a lot of nudging and socializing of this topic. Really important work to be doing. And looks like many people are thinking about planning and how we figure out priorities. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. If you want to keep adding some things into the chat, please do so. We're going to keep going. I'm going to turn this over to Dion right now, and she's going to share a little bit more about what how the menu came to be, and who inspired us.
So as I can see in the chat, there are a lot of us who are still working on our adaptation plans. But as we all know, there are a few gardens that have been at the forefront of this process, namely the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, and has been kind of helping us think through, adaptation and how we can approach it in botanic gardens. So I just wanted to highlight some of the adaptation plans that gardens have already created so far. As I said, the ones that were at the forefront was the Melbourne Botanic Garden, that created a landscape succession plan for their garden. And soon after that, also with the Climate Change Alliance of Botanic Gardens, created a landscape succession toolkit that gardens can use to kind of use the same method and process to think through adaptation in their gardens. So that's a really useful resource that we can all still refer to kind of think through our process. The UC Davis Arboretum and Botanic Garden also created a living landscape adaptation plan soon after, and their focus is also on creating a resilient campus, not only a garden, and also involving students and research in that whole process. And recently, this year, the Kew Garden has also created an adaptation plan, again inspired by the work that Melbourne and others have done in this sphere. And also, we spoke to the Bernheim Garden recently, the Arboretum, and they have been working on a climate crisis action plan, utilizing a framework of the drawdown tools that are online and also may be worth looking at. There's also looks at organizational sustainability, so that's an interesting lens to look at it as well. So using these as inspiration, we thought it'd be good to distill the main learnings from the things various gardens are doing into like a menu of actions that people can draw on to provide inspiration and ideas. And so I'll just go into the process that we went through while thinking about this. So we did a literature review as well as a scan of various garden websites to see what people are doing. And a lot of the times what gardens may be doing, they don't think about as adaptation, but it is. And there are many small actions that people, on small and big actions people are taking just based on their knowledge and expertise that you may not think of as adaptation, but is thinking long term towards sustainability. So that's, I think, a very important thing to kind of think about when we think of adaptation. Yeah, when you talk to your horticulturists, you'll find a lot of methods they're using that are already future focused. And so we also did a survey of botanic gardens through the Climate Change Alliance, one in 2022 and the other was in 2000, so this year, 2024, just to get a sense again of what are the innovative practices that botanic gardens are doing across the world and what kind of tools exist, what case studies can we highlight. And then we worked with Peter, who has been at the forefront of this work for a long time to kind of help. He helped us compile all this data and develop a framework for the menu and has created a report which we kind of shared out. And we've been doing a lot of workshops at the American Public Garden Association conference as well as the BGCI conference to get feedback from the broader community about how useful this menu really is to people. And so just a little bit more about the surveys that we conducted. We The map there is a map of all the members of the Climate Change Alliance, and we received about 40 responses roundabout in the 2 surveys that we did. So we're hoping to welcome even more feedback from the rest of the members as we go along with, and we basically tried to like focus, as I said, on like understanding what existing plans or tools are helping people so far, what case studies and initiatives various gardens have kind of undertaken, and what resources and support is needed. And I'm going to hand it over now to Peter to talk more about the framework that he developed.
Thanks, Dion, and hello, everybody. I just wanted to use this map as a call to arms, actually, because you can see all those red dots of members, and we got basically around 40 responses for 2 surveys, and I'm sure there's many more botanic gardens and individuals who are working in the space of adaptation. So this is a call to obtain more information, because the menu will be most useful when we capture more innovative techniques and ways that people are doing things across the globe. So it's a little embarrassing. We've only got 40 responses out of well over 500 members. So I'm putting the word on you to talk to your colleagues and other gardens that you know, and to become part of the alliance, but also to contribute to the menu. So it's going to work best if we capture all that wide botanical intelligence that exists across the world and all that expertise. So it's just a bit of a call to put some pressure on your colleagues to contribute. So in talking about the menu, we came up with 5 strategies, and then a number of approaches, and under those approaches sit tactics. Look, you could frame this sort of in any way that you would like, really. It's just a way of, the intention was to be a bit like a restaurant menu where you pick the ingredients you want to use. So if you're an organisation, that top layer are your strategies, and you think, well, actually, we do a lot of these things really well, but we're not so good on our resilient plant collections. You can go into that space and then look at the approaches, and then you can actually tick down to more and more detail as you wish to. So it's not so overwhelming with all this information sitting in front. So it was sort of geared towards the user being able to pick the information they wish to apply. But yeah, you may want to use all of it. So the strategy, Tessa has done a good job of explaining this better than I, so I'm going to use her words. She's looking embarrassed now. But Tessa put it this way, that the strategy is sort of the why. The approaches, which are the bits that sit under that, the what, and then the tactics are the how. But I think the other thing I would like to emphasise is this: it's not just a top-down approach to how you might respond to climate change. Sometimes the tactics actually inform the strategy. So it's a two-way process, and in a way it's a circular process, because as Tara was saying earlier, that continuous improvement model, it's really a circle. You develop your strategy, you look at the approaches you use, you do your tactics, then you think, well, actually, no, that didn't work as well as we would like. We go back and readjust the approach, or even adopt a different strategy. So it's not a climate change adaptation is a process. It's not a set and forget outcome that you've just achieved it, because the climate is continuing to change. And even if we stop emissions today, it's going to continue to change. So it's a changing dynamic that we have to respond to. So, looking at this as an example, your strategy, or, you could say almost your outcome, if you like, is you want resilient plant collections. What approaches might you take towards that? And those approaches could be conducting a climate risk assessment. It could be sourcing more taxes that are suitable to your climate. It could be developing meta collections with other partners, as in, if you're a garden in a currently cooler climate where your climate might be becoming more suitable, you can host vulnerable species from another garden that are not so easily seed banked, for example, add to your resilience, but at the same time you're achieving a conservation outcome. That's probably another point I want to make, is this sort of thinking and approach helps integrate what you do. It's not just looking at one action on alone or in a silo. you start to become more integrated with your approaches. So yeah, there's just some ways that you can approach it. I think the other thing I'd like to highlight is doing this from the Melbourne experience, and I'll come into this, but I wanted to just highlight the benefits of approaching it this way, and some of the benefits are enhancement of existing tools, which I'll come to in more detail, but also I think just general building of plant environment expertise. And I was challenged by this myself, is talking to horticulturists in Melbourne. I say, do you know what the rainfall range is for that plant or what temperature it grows in? And most people can't tell you because we've never really looked in that space. And I'm just as guilty as well. Now you've got staff who can tell you about the environments in which plants grow or what temperature range they've found them in or what's their typical precipitation. So one of the benefits is that we've actually, by following this sort of approach, you enhance your internal expertise at levels that you'd never seen before. So I want to talk about a case study at Melbourne Gardens, and I'm not going to talk about the landscape because I'm not really in that position to be able to do that. But I would like to talk about the landscape succession strategy in the sense that was sort of the strategy. And one of the approaches was looking at climate risk and resilience to the collection. So there was a climate risk assessment that was done. And I suppose you could say that was a tactic in a way. But the interesting thing about that is it actually led to a global tool. So Melbourne looked at something that would help them internally assess their risk and better manage their collections. That mechanism is now a worldwide tool, the climate risk, the climate assessment tool, which is hosted at the BGCI website. So in a way, the tool was really developed by Botanic Gardens for the plant community. Anyone in the world can access that freely. Before that tool existed, there was nothing like that anywhere. And yes, the tool might need improvements and it might have some flaws, all that sort of thing. We acknowledge that. But before that, there's no one-stop shop I could go to in the world to look at plants around the world, look at their climate risk. It just didn't exist. And so through the actions of Botanic Gardens, there's now a tool that urban forestry can use, even people with home gardens looking at their trees. And what I would like to add to that is we're now looking at creating another version of that tool, so CAT 2, and I'm unashamedly asking for your support with that. We are looking for financial partners, but also people who are willing to work and want to be part of that. And the aim of this is to actually, at the moment, the tool covers about between 50 and 60,000 tree species. We want to expand that tool to cover more plants, so it has a much broader application. So keep in mind here that Botanic Gardens are actually contributing to climate resilience for landscapes, Botanic Gardens, people's front yards all around the world. This is something we should be very proud of as a group. And so I think, just to give you an example, as a where the menu is, you might create something in the menu, you might develop a strategy, you might develop approach, you might develop some tactics. You don't know where those will go. And your tactic might become a worldwide tool or it might become a regional tool for somebody else. So it becomes a platform by which we can share this botanical intelligence around the world. I think that's enough for me, but thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of the pathways in which where this menu has actually come from. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, Peter, and for your ongoing contributions to this work, because you really have been a thought leader helping us all join you on the journey. So it's really valuable. So we're back to our waterfall activity and wanting to sort of get a bit of feedback from you all about the menu and how can we make the menu better and more useful. This is something that we really don't want to just create a tool that is not of value or of use to practitioners in Botanic Gardens. big and small. So that has been something in our thinking about this, as how do we also support the very tiny botanic gardens that are often sometimes very small staff teams. So at this moment, if you don't mind sort of providing any feedback of what you might find useful from your position. From our position, something that is useful are case studies, and we're going to get to that, but definitely thinking about how we can learn and see how adaptation in action is happening, and what are individuals facing, what are the benefits and challenges of actually implementing those actions. So hopefully you might have some feedback for us, and I'm going to invite us on 3, or let's just press go and see what feedback we might get. Yeah, a range of activities. And that's definitely something that, even though our surveys have been a somewhat small sample size of what we think is actually happening, there's definitely a range of different ways that gardens are thinking about this and adapting this to their local contexts, also building on, for example, some gardens learning from urban foresters in their area, and sort of this knowledge sharing. So all learning options. This is definitely a learning journey. Grouping actions by scale.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Peta, for the, further workshops on how to implement the strategies, how to think through them. We've been doing a lot of discussions about how to work across our diverse knowledge systems within the garden to bring in our guest services, our horticulture, and other places, so that we're all learning how Botanic Garden is successfully. The organizational structure, I think of Botanic Gardens as a bit like snowflakes. Everyone's a little bit different, organized and structured in different ways and funded in different ways.
Can
Yeah,
I jump in? Tara, can I jump in there? That was a really good point about organisational structures, and I would like to speak to that. I think the other really important aspect of this, and we sometimes forget, and we shouldn't, is the people. And landscape succession, you've also got to think about people succession and building in the expertise, or developing the expertise in your people. And you can have an organisational structure, but they really reflect the expert people that you have. And I think it's about, the menu really needs to look at how we invest in our people as well, to build their capacity and expertise, and actually make sure we capture it when they've been at the organisation for 30 years and they walk out, and all that information goes with them. So I think I'm coming more and more to realising that's so important. We can develop all the strategies and tools we like, but if we don't invest in our horticulturalists, our botanists, our engagement teams, then we miss out. So I think that's a really important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I definitely would echo that. While we think about landscape succession, how do we think about knowledge succession, and bringing in young people into this work, and into long-term thinking? There's a lot of technical information that is held in the minds of our horticulturalists and curators and garden leaders. Okay, we're going to have another little question here of, do you have an example from your garden, or do you know of other horticulture or organizations that are doing some fantastic work that would benefit as a case study to show the other, sort of to include in the menu? One of the goals of the menu is to socialize and showcase that there are many examples of work happening around the world. So if you could put in links if you had them. You can say, contact me at my garden and I'll share some case studies. This is something that in the draft menu we shared, we really are trying to compile these examples. And I know myself, seeing other examples in place, what I love about Botanic Garden communities is you're like, I want that exact thing back at my garden. And this is what I think in the world of Botanic Gardens. I know at the Cranbourne Botanic Garden, they had a research garden and some microclimate weather stations. And I've had, since I saw that, I want that at our garden. How do we create that? So we're looking for those kind of examples, and we'd love to showcase your garden and the work that you are doing. So maybe if you don't mind, we can put some examples in there, or if there's case studies that you think would be helpful in your garden that you might need. So say you want to be able to highlight what are gardens doing for microclimate stations? What do they look like? You could also highlight an example or a case study that you would like to see, and we can try to see if we can find these examples. So maybe when you have the opportunity, just press enter and we can see if there's any case studies that we would like to showcase. Thank you, Anthony. Looking for predicted climates, sharing resources. Fantastic. Great to share. And please continue sort of adding some examples here. The thing that I've learned is that there's not always the need to recreate the wheel, because the gardens are doing such great things that we can showcase what's happening. Oh, interesting. Some really great work looking at climate refuges. Refuge. Yes. Great, Tessa. You're going to share some more from Australia. And I think when we were thinking about case studies, we're definitely thinking about trying to showcase gardens of various sizes. So small scale examples would be fantastic to be able to show, of course, as for larger gardens as well. Fantastic. So thank you. I see some other examples coming in. That's really great. And this is always an interesting question that we've been asking. And in a perfect world, if we were all together, we would have some discussions on this. And at the BGCI Singapore Congress, I thought this was such a fantastic point of discussion. And I learned a lot from other botanic gardens around the world. What are some of the barriers that you're facing to taking more action or taking faster action on adaptation? And if you don't mind just sharing some of those in the chat, are the barriers often their capacity, financing, time, but it's just helpful to see if there's other things that you feel are preventing your garden from moving forward. Lack of resources, right? Yep, there's the old resources. And some of this can also be sort of lack of awareness about what adaptation is and the importance of it, and sort of how the return on investment of adaptation now is going to be so significant long term. But how do we talk about the benefit? These long-term benefits are really tricky. Yeah, great question. How do we manage change in existing tree collection without making wholesale removals? How do we transition our landscapes? It's really one of the things I think we're struggling with.
Tara, can I jump in there? I think this could have been another waterfall question, but sometimes when you are struggling for resources, it actually, in a way, can blind you to opportunities, because you just sort of fall into that, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, so we can't do anything. But sometimes I think it's useful to, and I acknowledge that's a real barrier. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I think it's really helpful sometimes to say, how could we do it, rather than why we can't do it. And I think sometimes people come up with very innovative ways of doing something with very little in the way of resource. And sometimes the most efficient gardens are actually those that don't have a lot of money because they've had to learn how to be very innovative and creative. So I think in this climate change space, we've really got to be asking this question, well, how could we do it? We can't do it like this, but is there a way we could do it? And I think that's for all of us, really, because we all need more resources. There's no doubt about that. But I think just having that, rather than looking at the risks and the issues, looking for what the opportunities are, and maybe even looking outside your garden. Can you partner with somebody or work with outside your fence that you may not have traditionally done? It's just a way of thinking about it.
No, I totally agree, Peter. And the work that I think I've been really inspired by is some of the work of small scale gardens that are tapping into their volunteer resources and really sort of being very creative and doing a lot with very little. Great. And so I just wanted to, as we sort of wrap up, is thinking about our next steps. So for the menu, if you haven't tuned into, we're looking for case studies. So please, maybe we can, maybe we put Dion's email in the chat. If you have an example or a case study afterwards, or you connect with some of your staff about what case studies they might want to highlight from your garden, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dion. If you don't catch her email, you can also send it to Tessa, because she's our secretariat for the Alliance. So please feel free to share those or tap your staff or your teams to learn more. We're going to always be sort of trying to, the idea of the menu is that it's a living document that we're going to be integrating feedback and adapting it as we move forward and trying to publish and put it online. For UBC Botanical Garden, we're trying to finalize our climate adaptation plan and publish it for next year. And we've been seeking funding to try to implement the actions that we're identifying as our priorities. And just wanting to perhaps finish on a little sharing, if people wanted to put in the chat from this session, is there anything that you could see as a next step in your organization or in your research that you might want to share with us about how this work and what you might do as a next step in your climate adaptation journey? So I'll just give you a moment to think about a next step. And great, I'm seeing some translating for our technicians and following the framework. That's fantastic. And we have a question. Yes, please, feel free to ask.
Peter, you mentioned earlier about wanting to do, version 2 of the tool. Is there a particular way that you want to do that in terms of help, either financially or with people? I mean, have you developed a menu, or are you just asking anybody, hey, if you want to help us, get in touch?
Thanks, Wolfgang. So the CCABG, or the Climate Change Alliance, is part of that, I suppose, project planning. And there's actually been an initial proposal of what that might look like and how that might go. It's really being at the moment spearheaded from the Royal Horticultural Society in the UK. They're very interested, and they're already making a financial commitment towards the project. I think I can say that, but the project isn't locked in, and we're hoping to get support. So I think probably the best way to look at this is to do this through the CCABG Secretariat, because the CCABG is part of this project. Yeah. Probably contact Tessa if you're interested or want to help or know people who might be interested in helping. We're really keen to take this to another level. The plan with the tools to actually incorporate some more parameters. Other people want other information, so it'll probably include other climatic parameters. Some are not so supported by research, but people just want the information anyway. But really the big push is to include a lot more plants, and particularly try and include a lot of garden plants, so that the tool could actually be used for home gardens, for example. One of the interesting points the Royal Horticultural Society raised, we forget about in terms of ecosystem services, not so much a Botanic Gardens thing, but looking at ecosystem services of green space, we forget about all the residential gardens in cities that are actually contributing an enormous amount to green space, well-being, cooling, highlighting the value of plants. And, the tool could be very useful for informing that and making our cities more resilient as an outreach. But I think wherever the tool ends up, it's going to be very useful for Botanic Gardens as well, because we have huge collections of plants that aren't trees, and we need to understand vulnerability, potential vulnerability of those plants. So I think, the best way, if you're interested, is to channel that through Tessa and the Secretariat. But if you definitely are interested in being involved, put your hand up. Or somebody who you might know of an entity that could be a good funding provider. There's a few entities in the UK that are showing interest, and we're just really keen to take that to another level, because I know a lot of people want more information. That's why I'm putting an unashamed plug out for it, because I actually do think it'll be, the enhancements that could be made to it are going to be very useful for everybody, regardless. So I hope that's answered your question. It was a long-winded answer, but
no, that's great. I mean, that's fantastic if the RHS is involved, because they've got, I forget now, somewhere between 600 and 700,000 members. It's a huge driver across people who love plants. So no, that's great. And they've got fantastic amount of resources in terms of stuff they've developed already, which could feed into it. So that's really, really good. Well done.
Yeah. The other thing I should mention is really looking at cultivar taxonomy. So they seem to have a very well curated taxonomy for cultivars, and as you know, a large number of our street trees are cultivars, and they currently are not in the risk. A lot of them aren't in the risk assessment. So bringing in, and even natural, looking at infra-specifics and things are pretty challenging, but even looking at natural cultivars that exist. So that's another aspect that's being looked at, is how do we incorporate those into the mechanism. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, we've got a
Claire
couple
and
of
then
hands up there.
Graciela.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make the comment that whilst the CCABG is small and funded by, as in our funding is small, so it's funded by the Royal Botanic Gardens Melbourne, we will be contributing to some funds to the next stage of CAT 2. So again, any amount is going to be useful to continuing that really, really important work. And we will and can happily send something out to all of our CCABG members. But yeah, the Alliance itself will be contributing some money to support CAT 2 as well.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. Graciela. Oh, we can't hear you.
Mute.
Sorry, I have two questions here. The first one is if we are allowed to use the menu freely, is available for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so we are doing that. And
Good.
and the second one is our garden has been designed as the regional hub for Argentina for the global biodiversity standard. And actually the standard has a very, very little chapter about climate change. And I think maybe the Secretariat, who is in hands of BGCI, should think more about establishing a new chapter, compiling all these ideas about climate change for the projects we are assessing and evaluating. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I saw the launch of the Global Biodiversity Standard in Cali, Colombia, and I'm so glad to hear that you guys are a regional hub. The Global Biodiversity Standard's a really important framework, and I think that feedback to integrate more of these actions for adaptation in the menu are really important to think about how it aligns with that standard. So thank you for that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sort of draw us to a close and just want to thank you for your time today and for your energy and thinking about climate adaptation and showing up. Really appreciate it, and continuously and inspired to learn from all of the action and work underway. Please use the menu. It's a big file. We're going to be trying to get it on a website shortly, so it's a little bit easier to share and to promote it out that way. Don't hesitate. Our emails, as we say, are always open. If you have questions, you're welcome to share them, connect with Tessa or us directly. And just want to thank you for your time and your efforts, and to Peter and the team that we have here. And we have a great student. You don't see her, but Zara's over there working in the way in the back, helping us. So this is truly a collective effort by many, many people. So thank you for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Tara, Dion, and Zara. That was fantastic. Thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to attend. It was really great to see sort of the different perspective and ideas come through. This, of course, has been recorded, so you will get an email when we have popped it up on the website if you want to review it, and that will also include, again, the draft document that Tara has provided, their contact details as well. And of course, if you want to share that with anybody, go ahead. We're all about sharing good information and just making connections and that sort of thing. We are a bit over time, so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them through to me now. And I will just thank you all again for showing up, and may the rest of your day be delightful. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.